She is in Dubai and is our voice of Dubai. Joumanna Bercetche, our voice of the Middle East, I should say, with Horizons, and joins us, no doubt, from a changed Dubai here through their Sunday afternoon and into evening. Joumanna, just as a first question, how has Dubai changed in the last 12 or 18 hours?
Two data points. For the first time since this war erupted over a week ago, we're hearing of flights being canceled to Dubai. This is not other parts of the region, specifically to Dubai and Doha. British Airways, Singapore Airlines reportedly have halted, postponed some of the flights that were scheduled to come in to those key cities in the GCC. Also, a short while ago, the UAE Nuclear Authority put out a statement saying that there's been no impact on the UAE as a result of those attacks on nuclear facilities. So I think those two things together tell you a lot about how specifically the UAE and broader Gulf countries feel about what has gone down in the last 24 hours.
In the last 24 hours, and maybe extended out to 30 hours, for example, Anwar Gargash, diplomatic advisor to the Sheikh of the United Arab Emirates, has said, quote, a difficult aftermath. With all of your experience, Joumanna, what is the simplicity of Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney? Paul's more sophisticated than I am, but the simplicity of our analysis, Joumanna, we need some granularity now. What are those difficult aftermaths that could be out there in your Middle East?
Yeah, so if you look at all of the statements that the various foreign ministries put out from the region, they've all talked about, this is the first time they use the word catastrophic potential regional consequences. So it's been put up in terms of severity, how they see the potential regional broader implications. But I think at this point, the real question is, what does the retaliation look like? And I just want to draw on one specific example that we have in recent history on what potentially the Iranian retaliation could look like, and that is Qasem Soleimani. Remember, President Trump mentioned that in his speech just now. They took him out on January the 3rd, 2020. It took Iran 5 days to respond to that. And what they did is they targeted specific 2 U.S. bases in Iraq, but they gave the U.S. advance notice. So in the back of that, there were no actual deaths reported on the back of it. There were concussions, there were brain traumas that were elicited on the back of it. There wasn't a major disruptive an event that brought in the rest of the region. And the reason I bring this up is perhaps the best hope is that you get a targeted retaliation of that sort of nature, as opposed to the Iranians going down the route of hitting U.S. military bases within the Gulf, which obviously would be the worst case scenario for these many Gulf countries.
Joumanna, you cover the Middle East. You're based in Dubai. What's the level of support for the action taken by the United States last night, generally speaking?
I think they would never say anything explicitly, and if you look at the statements that were put out this morning, it was statements of condemnation and warning about the regional consequences, using that word catastrophe again. But you've got to go back to, again, the diplomatic efforts that these countries have made to reduce tensions in the region the last couple of years. We've spoken about this on the show, but Saudi Arabia did have their own détente mediated by China with Iran back in 2020 after, incidentally, the Soleimani attack. And that is because for these countries, they want to focus on economic security. They want to focus on their economic diversification plans. Remember, it was only a month ago, President Trump was in the region talking about the face of the new Middle East and what all of these countries, from Saudi Arabia to Qatar and UAE, are doing in the spaces of AI and diversification away from hydrocarbons. And one important criterion that these leaders are focused on is maintaining that political stability so that they can continue with those economic efforts. They see these last events as very disruptive and not helpful at all in terms of the advancement of those goals.
Joumanna, since the October 7th attacks on Israel, it appears quite clear that Israel is, holding no punches in trying to settle all scores that it may have against anybody that has been seen as an enemy, whether it's military groups or even nation states such as Iran. Is there a perception that things fundamentally are changing, that balance of power in the Middle East is fundamentally changing, and that Israel's reasserting itself yet again?
Absolutely, definitely, this has been and Israel on the offense since October 7, as you say, striking out at all of its independent adversaries. Iran being the major big one, which is why we saw those attacks a week ago. But I would just say keep an eye on the proxies as well, and the language, for example, coming out of Lebanon, the Lebanese government, the new Lebanese government that's more pro-West and keen to keep the tensions at bay. They actually said, the president said over the weekend, Lebanon will 200% not get involved in this war. Hezbollah have been laying low. Remember, a lot of their own capacity has been diminished as well. So keep an eye on the proxies. But you could say over the course of this last 20 months, a lot of proxies, capabilities, and also appetite to get involved has been diminished.
Joumanna, speak to Americans right now. Our some knowledge of Kuwait is just one example, folks. Is I believe it was August of 1990 and the Iraqi attack of Kuwait City, and maybe for a brief moment we could find it on the map. You live this. You were in Kuwait in the last 12 months interviewing the deputy CEO of their major bank. You've lived this. So what is Kuwait like this morning? What is Qatar like this morning? What is Oman like this morning?
Very nervous. And it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning. The people have short-term memories here, and the history, as you say, going back to the first Gulf War, back to the Iraq War of 2003, back to the failed Arab Spring of 2011, the military interventions that ensued, none of those actually brought about extra political stability to the region. And I think that's why you have leaders around here, and even European foreign leaders as well. You have the likes of President Macron warning about the chaos that could ensue should the broader region get involved in this conflict, and should the U.S. push for regime change, which, by the way, it was very clear now when Pete Hegseth was speaking that wasn't the stated aim. But I think it also is an implicit aim, perhaps, of some of the attacks that are being leveled at Iran right now. But the big question is, let's say there is a forced attempt of regime change in Iran. What does it follow up with? Who's going to replace the IRGC? Is there an actual opposition? Is there a viable opposition? Is there any potential replacement? We don't know the answer to these questions. And it's that unknown, that big question mark of what could follow, which I think really makes people nervous here.
Joumanna, thank you so much.